Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our session on social media investigations. Joining us today are two speakers. First up is Jean Leroux, who is from the Digital Forensics Lab for Sub-Saharan Africa. And then Alan Chaboy, who is a lead investigator and runs the Code for Africa iLab out of Kenya. As you all know, social media is the new and massively important battleground for misinformation and disinformation. So Jean and Alan are, I suppose, our ground forces to fight misinformation, to quote one of our political parties. So how it's going to work is Jean's going to go first and give us a case study of the Tracy Ziller expose that he recently completed, taking us through the kind of investigative tracks that he follows. And then he'll take a couple of questions, and then Alan will speak to us about specific tools and how to use them to undertake these kinds of investigations. Then Alan will take some questions, and then both Jean and Alan will be available at the end for any further general questions you might have. So if you have questions that you want me to ask, please feel free to type them into the chat, and I'll collate them. And time permitting, we'll try and answer all of them, but I'll direct them to either of the two participants, either at the end of their sessions or at the end of the session in general. So let's begin by handing over to Jean. Jean, thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Chris. I'm going to be sharing my screen in a few seconds. There we go. You guys should be seeing my screen. Chris and Alan, can you maybe just confirm that you are seeing my screen at the moment?
We are seeing it.
Perfect. Okay, so today I'm going to be taking you through a case study of the Tracy Ziller investigation. So let me just get to the front of the presentation. That should help quite a bit. There we go. So it's going to be looking at the open source investigation of the Tracy Ziller account. For those unfamiliar with the Tracy Ziller account, I'll be going into what the account did, but it was basically a fake Twitter account that was using racial disinformation to monetize the traffic. It was using that by directing the traffic from its Twitter account onto websites being run by the individual, and those websites then had ads running, which allowed him to make money off of the disinformation he was sharing. The account, as you can see on the right, was portraying itself as a white South African woman. And just for a brief overview of today's session, I'm going to be introducing myself. I'm going to be going through some of the background and concepts, which Alan will be diving into a bit more in depth later on. And then I'll also be actually looking at the Tracy Ziller account itself, how I uncovered who's behind the account, the things I looked at, the kind of the digital breadcrumbs I followed to get to the identity of this individual. Just starting off, that's me. That's pretty much as pretty as I get. I'm a research associate for the Digital Forensic Research Lab, and our goal and our mission is to identify, explain, and analyze disinformation using open source techniques. All of our research is done using open source investigation techniques. So once we're done with it, anyone else can take the same information and then hopefully come to the same conclusion as we have. All of this relies on public information, so things on social media, websites, CIPC records, which is our company registrations office, things on Facebook, Twitter, and Google. And the idea is that the findings should be replicable, they should be shareable, and they should be independently verifiable at the end of the day. One of the biggest hurdles that we often find, and that's kind of the crux of this investigation, was attributing a specific account to a specific individual. And you can expand this to larger disinformation campaigns as well. So what you'll find is you'll find an account or you'll find a campaign, but it's difficult to pin that on a specific individual. And that's because open source investigations can discern behavior, but you cannot divine the intent behind that behavior. So you can, for example, see that a network is operating in a certain way or a specific account is operating in a certain way, but it's often difficult to pin that down on a specific individual unless you get really lucky. And in this case, fortunately, I did. So some of the signals we kind of look at is like linguistic cues. You look at the objectives of the campaign, whether it's for money or for political gain. You'd look at the origin, if it's coming from a specific country or a specific political party. And then as you get to the right-hand side of this graph, it starts getting more and more strong. And the kind of strongest attribution factor you can get is some kind of a money trail. Unfortunately, that really falls inside the ambit of an open source investigation. So the aims of disinformation campaigns, we kind of bracket them into three categories. The first one is politics, which you'd find this would be PR campaigns or electoral influence and reputation management campaigns. And South African examples of that would be the Bell Pottinger campaign that we had a few years back, which included the WMC leaks and the so-called Gupta bots, which was all part of this political campaign to massage the reputation of a specific family in South Africa. Others do it for the fun. We recently in South Africa saw quite a lot of people sending out chain WhatsApps that liquor stores would close again after they were reopened during the lockdown. And there's no financial or political gain in there, but somebody's deriving some fun and some, a little bit of laughter from the fact that people were queuing outside liquor stores, trying to get in before the new ban came into effect. Just a quick example of what the WMC Leaks Twitter account looked like back then, targeting specific journalists and editors. And there's an example of one of the queues following rumors that our liquor stores would be closing down again during the lockdown. The third example would be then money. Now, this is quite often seen on fake news websites. The example that I've provided here is an example of one of the fake news websites. And all of these articles and things that you see are adverts. And that's how they monetize the traffic coming to the site. Different examples are, for example, where people would use cryptocurrency mining on the background of the website while you're visiting and while you're reading these fake news articles. And the end game of these websites are to get you to click on the articles, click on their website. And the moment you do that, you start bringing them in 5 cents, 10 cents, 15 cents. And that's where they derive their income from. And this is also where the Tracy Ziller account nested within. It wasn't a political campaign. It wasn't something for the joke. It was a commercial campaign that was aiming to score the owner some money. And it does that through, firstly, programmatic adverts, which are adverts that are tailored towards each of the visitors. That's, for example, Google AdSense, Taboola or NGID. That's the kind of ad platforms that you'll find on most websites. You can also find some people selling screen space on a website, although this is a bit less popular, mainly because it's less effective. And then also you've got crypto mining. I had one example where the website owners was literally running a crypto mining algorithm in the background while you were visiting the website. And you'd only pick this up once you realize that your computer was running at a much higher pace than normal. And then lastly, and this is also a bit less often seen, is that they would use these scams and websites to get you to register, and in so doing, hand over your personal information. So in terms of the Tracy Ziller account, these are some of the kind of topics that the account was saying and using to tweet out. You can see there's quite a lot of engagement on these tweets at the bottom, and this is kind of a frequent narrative that the account was saying. It was trying to juxtapose black and white interests, and it was doing it from the position of a white woman. This image, for example, was taking a swipe at a South African celebrity, Kanye Mbau. And the image, you can quite clearly see that Broncos mask that the individual is wearing is a US, I think it's an NFL team. So it's obviously not a South African photo that was being used here. Similarly, this one in particular, it's quite a gory image here, was a tweet that was sent out urging white South Africans to send their gardeners and their domestic workers out to go and do shopping, because the hand sanitizers in shops are, this is the kind of side effects from using it. And this was then later on used to pivot people into visiting these websites. So in these tweets, you'll see that the account was claiming that it's got matric certificates for sale. This was a typical clickbait article where it was claiming that an 80-year-old man had sexual intercourse with a 19-year-old woman and had a heart attack as a result. This was another one with similar kind of, very sensational, very kind of, ooh, I need to click and read this vibes. And through all these, you'll see that there's the same website cropping up. So the account itself didn't give too much away. You'll see, for example, on this, it only gave the name. There was not a lot to go on from the account itself. And what I use is a tool called Autonomy to first look at when the account was created and get some vital details, such as the user ID, which is this long string starting with 1277. And this kind of gives you an idea of what the account is, when it was started, what the possible motivations for it might be. Autonomy also gives you other useful information, such as the number of tweets per day and the number of replies, the kind of engagements that you can see with the account. And particularly, it shows you the activity of the account. Now, this is quite useful to gauge whether an account is automated, whether the individual takes lunchtime breaks, if it's a paid account, and so on. Here's another example where you can clearly see that they start tweeting at around 5 o'clock in the morning, and then they persist until about 8 p.m. in the evening. It doesn't look like there was a lunch break or time off over weekends. So chances were that this was an individual running the account. So what I did was I took the account and I used the Twitter API, which is Twitter's kind of free back-end access to all of the tweets and the tweets data to gather all of their tweets. And at that stage, the account had only made 104 tweets. And what this showed me was, in this large, boring kind of spreadsheet, was the kind of accounts that they were tweeting to. You'll see they mostly just sent out tweets on the left-hand columns. But what was really interesting was these columns showing the domains and the URLs being sent out. And what this then showed was that out of these 104 odd tweets, the majority of them were sent to websites, either whatsappgroup.co.za, jobsfinder.co.za, and search67.com. So the rest of the tweets didn't contain any URLs, but these three URLs made up the bulk of their tweets up until that stage. So what I then did was I took the same data, used a tool called Gephi to link each of these nodes. Basically, I took each and every single tweet and each and every single account, and then linked them with who they were tweeting at, who they were replying to, who they were engaging with. And what this does is it builds up this large network map of interacting nodes that are either retweeting each other or they are engaging with each other. And this is basically what it is. You link these two, which links to a third, which links to a fourth. And as you build up this image, you eventually get this kind of network with Tracy Ziller sitting at the center of it. I did the same thing then for the websites to kind of get an idea of who are, who's linking and who's retweeting those websites. And for once I established that the Tracy Ziller account was mainly sharing links to these websites, I actually had a look at the website itself. Now, there's a lot of info you can gather from a website. In this case, it was actually quite easy. The search67.com contact us page provided a cell phone number, they provided a business address, and importantly, a company registration number, which is quite useful. It's also sometimes useful to look into the source code of the web page to find other links and clues. This here, for example, was in the source code of the websites. These are the same three websites I identified earlier. There were links between the Google Analytics code, which is marked here in red, and the Google AdSense code, which is marked in green. And this established a link between all three of these websites, that they were either managed by the same individual through the red blocks, or they were sending advert money to the same individual via the green blocks in the code. Using those IDs, I could then actually go and look to see which other websites are using the same AdSense codes, and then also the same analytics codes. So now we're up to about 5 different websites that gives us an idea of who's sitting behind them. And then using who information, which is the registration information for websites, you could see who these websites were registered to. Now, some of them were locked behind GDPR regulations. So you might need to shop around a bit and try and see if you can find a website that does give you the correct information. But this is basically a kind of a snapshot of what I managed to find, that all of these websites were registered to this email address, sigogo@gmail.com. And in some cases, I could even find a cell phone number and a name, as you can see on the right-hand side. And looking at those websites only, these are the accounts that were sharing those websites the most. So even though Tracy Ziller was kind of the first one we see, that was not the main account sharing it. There was actually this Amogelang Paswa was an account that was sharing it in the main. And Tracy Ziller only seemed to be kind of a like one of the elements in this account that we managed to catch more quickly than the rest. These are the 2 accounts that were most active sharing these websites. And you can see both of them, it even got the websites up in their bios. So from there, it was basically a case of pivoting from the information I've already gathered. I had a bunch of emails, I had a name, I had a cell phone number, I had an email address. And I basically looked at company registration records, which was handily provided in the contact us page. And I managed to find the details of the director. The addresses here corresponded with the address provided on the website. Similarly, I went onto Facebook and identified both his personal Facebook account and his personal Twitter account. And all of these also shared links to these same addresses, kind of corroborating the information I'd already uncovered. And then even like on the website itself, one of the authors on the website was a guy by the name of Abel Mushi, which is obviously a fake name used by the author on the website. And I mean, even here on Matumba's Facebook account, he referenced back to a deceased friend of his by the name of Abel Mushi, all the way back in 2019, which again just corroborates these links adding up, linking into the account. And kind of the final nail was this particular one, which was on the EFF's website. You'll see here right, the second name from the top was Anthony Matumba, and both the email address and the cell phone number linked up to kind of tie up this whole net, linking him to the Tracy Ziller Twitter account. Subsequent to the investigation, the Tracy Ziller account hasn't stopped. There was a period where it stopped sharing links to Matumba's website. But as far as I know, it is still carrying on. I've unfortunately been blocked by the account, so I can't see what it's being tweeted by the account at the moment. But I mean, there's more than enough evidence linking Matumba to that account at that stage. I think, Chris, we can open up for questions.
Yep. So thanks very much, Sean. We've got one already from Malachi Brown, who wants to know if you can explain the Gephi network graph in a bit more detail. How do you understand what it means, and how do you work out the network behavior from it?
Yeah, I mean, we can spend an entire day working on Gephi network graphs. It's an absolutely fascinating thing, and it's one of probably the parts of the open source investigations I enjoy the most. What you've got is basically a node, which is an individual or an account in the network. In the context of a Twitter network, that'll be, for example, a Twitter account. And then each of these Twitter accounts are linked with each and every other Twitter account through a series of interactions, or I think it's called edges in the social analysis nomenclature. So you've got a Twitter account that's interacting with another Twitter account, and that establishes that line, that link. And as these different accounts start linking up with each other, how the algorithm inside Gephi works is it pulls all of these accounts into clusters and networks. So if, say, for example, me and Chris interact quite a lot on Twitter, and me and Alan interact as well, but not as often, the Gephi graphs will pull me and Chris closer together on the graph. And I think, let me quickly just share the screen again, and I can show you kind of examples of this from these. So say, for example, that might not be a good one to use, like these ones over here. You can see all of these accounts clustering around the Tracy Ziller account in the center are clustering there because they interacted directly with the Tracy Ziller account. Whereas the ones in the blue orbiting the Ntiki Mazwai account, you'll see there's a cluster that's kind of sitting in between Ntiki Mazwai and, let me see if I can annotate, yeah, this cluster over here. These are accounts that interacted with both of them. So the Gephi graph places them in between these two. And I mean, it takes some time to kind of learn how to read these graphs and what they entail and what they mean. But that's the gist of it. It places closely interacting accounts together, and it also places accounts that interact less farther away from each other. And then you can do quite nice things to sort the data. Like, for example, here I changed the size of each of the nodes to reflect the number of incoming and outgoing interactions. And that's why Tracy Ziller is so large here, because she was the one being interacted with the most.
And then Jean, just one more. Oh, wait, hang on, there's an official one that's just coming. Give me a moment. A question from Damu Abubakar. How do you use basic Twitter analytics to debunk misinformation if you're an investigative journalist who doesn't have a verified Twitter account?
Yeah, for the Twitter analytics, you don't need to have a verified Twitter account. I think it's one of the tools Ellen might be touching on. It's called TweetBeaver, which allows you to basically use a normal, regular Twitter account. You can log on to TweetBeaver and you can download an entire spreadsheet full of a specific account's tweets, their follower lists, who they're following, their likes, and so on. And when it comes to using this to debunk disinformation and misinformation, that'll kind of depend on the use case. We've had it, for example, where we use these kind of analytics to show that an account was being operated in a different time zone than the one it was reporting on. So it'll definitely depend on the findings of each of your investigations and also the use case that you're using it for.
Thank you. And then one from Yizi Wang asking, are comments, retweet, all shown as an edge? And are the edges weighted by number of interactions?
Yeah, in this case, the node size was weighted by the number of interactions. So that's why the Tracy Ziller account pops out as much as it does. And then let me quickly see what the second part was. Am I missing the chat now?
The second part was, are the edges? The second part was, are the edges weighted by number of interactions?
Yeah, in this case, the edges, I think in this particular graph, the edges weren't weighted by the interactions, but the nodes were. So the edges themselves won't be, thicker or thinner as a result of the number of interactions, but the node sizes would definitely differ.
And then just a last question, a non-technical question. What do you think the danger posed by an account like the Tracy Ziller account is? I mean, why are we so passionate about exposing it?
I mean, I think the biggest problem with accounts like these is because they are portraying themselves as something they're not. In this case, the Tracy Ziller account was pretending to be a white woman. We do have a very racially charged social media atmosphere in South Africa. Now, having an account like this namelessly, going out to distributing very racist and at the very least racially insensitive disinformation like this in order to make money at the end of the day is something that's not quite on. So what we had to do with this investigation was to shed light on the fact that this individual is doing that, and that on top of all of this, he's an elected representative for our third largest political party, which kind of just adds to the embarrassment of somebody running a campaign like this for little more than a bit of change at the end of the day.
Now, the last question that's just coming in from Tony Tendai speaks in a kind of frustrated way to that. Now, after all that, what should be done? Can such people be charged or arrested?
I mean, it depends on what they were saying. As far as I'm aware, in this specific case, the South African Human Rights Commission have taken action. I suspect, I'm not sure about the exact dates, but they, as far as I'm aware, they did issue summons against Matumba for his role in this specific account. But usually, I mean, it's partly a lack of understanding of how these networks operate, and also it's seen as very difficult to get the information, to get the platforms to comply and hand over incriminating information at the end of the day. So there is a bit of a lack of will on the part of law enforcement, and then secondly, on the part of platforms. I mean, unfortunately, in South Africa and in Africa as a whole, we're not the US and we're not Russia and we're not Europe. So we don't get kind of the same attention as those nations do when it comes to social media disinformation, even though we're pretty much on par with the amount of it that we are exposed to.
Yeah. I mean, I would say, Tony, that one of the positive effects of these kinds of exposures are that you get as much truth into the arena as possible to combat the untruths. Because I think that's part of what the Tracy Zille accounts of the world do, is to try and problematize the very idea of truth. So I think that's what's important, the kind of stuff that Jean and Alan do. Jean, thanks very much. Your virtual audience is applauding in the background, and we'll see you at the end. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alan, over to you.
Thank you, Chris. So my name is Alan Cheboy. I'm just going to share my screen. Yeah, so perfect. So I'm basically going to have a presentation on some of the tools, some of the techniques that we use to conduct social media investigations. And one thing to note is that in an investigation, there is no one way or one process to do an entire investigation. Different investigations have like different mechanisms, different dynamics. So at the end of the day, you need to be to have an idea that this might not be like the ideal or the one of the most trusted ways to do it, but it's a process that if you follow at the end of the day, you might be able to get like some of the results that you intend to do. Yeah, so just to introduce where I work. So I work for a company called Code for Africa. So it's one of the largest civic technology organizations operating across a number of countries within Africa. So I manage a team called iLab, which is part of the ANSIA network. And this is an in-house digital forensic team. So it's comprised of a number of data scientists and investigative specialists who spearhead like investigations into coordinated inauthentic behavior, into disinformation and tracking influence operations across the continent. Yes, so myself, my name is Alan Cheboy. I'm a manager in charge of forensic research and analytics at Code for Africa. So my background is in forensic audit. So I worked for an audit firm, KPMG, for about 4 years. So I was tasked with a number of complex investigations touching on cybercrime, anti-money laundering, corporate crimes, financial crimes across East Africa. So that is basically who I am. I'm also a certified fraud examiner and a certified ethical hacker. Yeah, so let's just look at some of the things that we are going to discuss today. So this is how the presentation will be like. So I just focus on some of the prominent social media that we normally meet during our investigations. And number one is Facebook. The other one is Twitter. And also looking at now investigations that cover people who use websites or blogs to try and push particular narratives within the continent. Yeah. So let's just have a brief of what each of those kind of investigations covers. So for Facebook, this will involve basically some of the tools and techniques that we use as forensic analysts to track down individuals, groups, and communities that use Facebook to try and push particular narratives in order to like change the public opinion, to polarize some other people, or to like basically do some coordinated inauthentic behavior, or at the end of the day to share disinformation across the platform. Also for Twitter, these are some of the tools and techniques that we use to like extract data, to analyze some of the data sets, and and to visualize so that you are able to pinpoint who exactly is driving particular conversations on Twitter itself. Yeah. So for Facebook, I know this has been touched by Jean in his presentation, but basically these are tools and techniques that we use to review the metadata behind the websites. So at the end of the day, we say that the internet never forgets. So when you create a website, there are some metadata that is available that investigators can use to try and at the end of the day, track who is behind the website, who is actually spearheading the sharing of particular information across social media platforms. Yeah. So, so what type of process do we use to do an analysis, or basically to do an entire online investigation? So at the end of the day, we are using open source tool sets, techniques, and data that is available openly. We never go into any private information as such. So that is what basically you should keep in mind. So the investigative process at the end of the day is when you identify that there's something that is trending, when you identify that there's something behind a particular narrative. So what you do is of course, you collect some of the data sets that will help you pinpoint who is actually behind sharing of that particular narrative. So that is what we call data scraping. So once you remove some of that data that is from, for example, Facebook or from Twitter, you do some data cleaning. You realize that whenever I'll use an example of a hashtag, whenever you have a trending hashtag on Twitter, sometimes people use those particular hashtags to try and probably sell their products. Some others will just plug into the conversation so that they can be visible, or so that they can probably garner followers from those across those platforms. So at the end of the day, all the data sets that you collect might not be relevant. So you need to do a lot of data cleaning. And now when you have the data sets that actually cover what you are trying to investigate, you now go into the data analysis stage. After the data analysis stage, now you try and visualize some of the data sets to try and gain insights or the kind of information that you can get from those data sets. Yeah. So, and then at the end of the day, when you identify key indicators or key individuals who are behind that particular narrative, you try and do something that we call profiling, so that you know who this person is, who is interacting with, what is the agenda behind all his posts or all his activity online. Yeah. So I'm going to discuss a number of tools within each of these milestones during an investigation. So how do you do your data scraping? So one thing that I know is that Facebook is a very rich source of investigation of data sets. And one thing that also you need to have an idea about, both Twitter and Facebook, these are just platforms that contain data sets. So every post, every user, every URL that is posted on Facebook or Twitter or across social media platforms, they're available somewhere in a table. And that is now why we use particular tools to try and source for those information, and then now use that information to try and do our analysis and pinpoint who exactly is behind the thing that we're investigating. Yeah. So for Facebook, we basically use a tool called CrowdTangle. If you've not heard of it, you can visit the link crowdtangle.com and try and see what exactly it's able to do. But basically, this is a tool that is used to search for key mentions or keywords or particular individuals within publicly available information on Facebook. Yeah. So you can't go and search for someone, for example, Alan Cheboy, using these tool sets, because that is not your account, your personal account is not public or an information that is available to the public until probably there's just basic information that you can be able to find, but probably the details, like for example, the gender, your contacts, those are private information. This toolset cannot access those particular that particular information, but at the end of the day, what you need is the publicly available information that you can be able to analyze and track and at the end of the day, inform your investigation. So for CrowdTangle, as an investigator, you might be interested in doing a search of keywords or personalities or conversations on Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, and Twitter. So it has a limitation on the Twitter side. You're only able to search for data sets available for the last 7 days. But for Facebook, you're fully in control of the data sets that's available. You can be able to download the data in a CSV, and then you're able to analyze and then try and find the information that you would want to find at the end of the day. So one of the techniques that's also interesting on Facebook is that I would like to share is for every page that is created on Facebook, there is a particular information that is shared called the transparency information. This has been implemented, I think, in the last quarter of last year. So for any page, this is you just go to the summary tab, and then you'll be able to see the history of that page. So like, for example, has the page ever been changed? The name of the page, has it been changed previously? When was the page created? So the administrators who run this particular page, where are they located? So this is a very useful and a very key thing that you need to be on the lookout when you do your investigations, especially on Facebook. Yeah. So for data scraping for Facebook, I will basically advise anyone to use a tool like CrowdTangle to do your analysis. CrowdTangle is also helpful because you can just do a blank search to try and identify which topics are trending on Facebook, which posts are the ones that have the most mentions on Facebook, most interactions on Facebook, and such kind of things. You are able also to set alerts such that whenever a keyword that you are interested in pops on Facebook, you are able to get a notification either on Slack if you use Slack, or on email, so that you can be able to review it at the end of the day and see what are people speaking about this particular thing. So it's a very useful tool when it comes to collecting data on Facebook. So for Twitter, we have this a tool called Twint. So it's an advanced Twitter scraping tool that is written in Python. So this tool is able to collect some of the data sets that you are interested in. If you have a hashtag, you just plug in the hashtag onto the tool itself, and then you'll be able to download some of the data sets for further analysis. Yeah. For another interesting tool, one thing that we noticed is at the end of the day, when people want to push particular information, either on Twitter or on Facebook, they end up creating either fake profiles. And one thing that is on the rise right now is people use automated bots or automated accounts so that they can be able to push particular content. So when you see something trending, you try and ask yourself, what is the means that they are using to try and push this particular agenda? So that is where people like also me created a tool called Botometer, where you can just be able to immediately plug in a username that you suspect, and then it will tell you whether that account is a bot or not. So maybe I can just show you some of the tools that I have mentioned. So like for Botometer, it's just as easy as this. You just come and add a username that you would like, and then you click on check. So, and then you authorize, of course, you need to be connected to your Twitter account. And then, so it will do an analysis and give you a rating based on one of the, so I think this is not my account. It has an underscore, so this is not available. Yeah, so that is my account. So it will give you a rating on whether it suspects that account is a bot or not. So if it goes to the red zone, then basically that means that the suspicion is that that particular account might be a bot. Yeah. So if it's within one and the green zone, then the suspicion for that account means that it might not be automated. It's somebody who is a human who is actually posting using that particular account. Yeah. So another interesting tool that can be used for bot identification is a tool that we call TruthNest. So for TruthNest, the same thing. You just plug in. So let me just plug in a username that you're interested in. So I'll just use my name again. And then you click on analyze. Yeah. So this will give you the basic profile of that particular account, and then it will also give you a percentage up here. So it's discovering some of the flags within the account. So the activity here, it will tell you it's normal, the influence is normal. That means that this account, the probability of this account being a bot is 0%. So some accounts you might find that it's giving you a higher percentage. So of course that means that that particular account might be a bot. So let me just try and find one of the accounts that, let's try and see. So this is an account that was pushing some of the agenda during the protest in Ethiopia. So let's just see some of the flags that this account had. So you can see the bot indicators is at 70% for this particular account. And if you point on it, it can tell you why it is rating that. And that means that it says that there is no rest during the day. One policy that we have is that humans tend to rest. So you might be able to tweet, for example, from early in the morning about 7 a.m. And then within the day, probably you are at work, you might reduce your number of tweets. During lunchtime, you're on Twitter again, trying to share some few things. But now for bots, you realize that it never tends to sleep. Like you have a tweet available for every hour of the day. So that is one thing that you should be on the lookout when you look at bots. So it will also, you can see that it says there's too many tweets per day. So for this particular account, it posts around 41 tweets per day. So our threshold is about 73 and or 74. So if an account posts more than that, then the suspicion for that account being a bot is very high. Yeah. So in the interest of time, let's continue with the investigative process that we are looking at. So you've already scraped your data using CrowdTangle or Twint or other tool sets that you can use like Twippy. So those are, depending on how you would, your particular area of interest, whether you are a technical person or not, you can find different tool sets that you can use for each milestone within this investigative process. So let's look at data cleaning and analysis. Why do you do data cleaning? So data cleaning basically involves removal of unwanted or off-topic conversations. And we've actually labeled that what we call ambulance chasers, yeah? So you're just chasing an ambulance. There's a conversation happening on Twitter, or there's a conversation happening on Facebook. You just jump on that conversation using probably a hashtag that has been linked to that conversation, so that you can sell your own ideas. You can just like be part of the trend and probably be featured within the network that is actually spearheading that particular narrative. So at the end of the day, so the basic analysis can achieve this for advanced analysis or use of NLP or natural language processing. So there is where you just identify keywords that you use that are used to like post, like for example, for one investigation that we did, we collected a hashtag and we realized that that hashtag had a lot of unwanted topics. That is, we have a number of individuals or a number of companies who are trying to like push particular products or to try and sell some of the products, and they plug in that hashtag so that it can appear within the conversation. So we look at we looked at that hashtag and saw that what that they use is buy, we are selling, or WhatsAppers or callers. So if you are doing your data cleaning, those are some of the words that you try to use to exclude some of the data that is available pointing to the ambulance chasing behavior. And then the data analysis itself is like when you now use the data sets to identify key data points. And one interesting data point that we always try to find is who started the conversation, which is the first tweet that used this particular hashtag. And once you find that particular account, you can be able to profile it and see who is this person, why did this person start this particular hashtag, yeah? And then also you look at the number of accounts in a network, that is looking at the ratios. So you find that some of the, you find that within a network or within 1,000 tweets, only 5 accounts posted about 900 tweets. That is a suspicious behavior. So those 5 accounts are probably indicate that they are linked and they share the narrative, like they're the ones who are spearheading the sharing of this particular narrative. And also you look at key accounts within a network. So using network analysis and social network analysis, the way John had mentioned, using Gephi, you try and now categorize and visualize and see who are the ones that are sharing, that have a huge impact within the network. Yeah. So advanced analytics always involves identifying things like bots and coordinated inauthentic behavior from the characteristics of that particular conversation. So for data visualization, so the two tools that we actually try to use in doing our investigations is number one, Gephi, the one that John has actually elaborated more during his presentation. So Gephi is just a network visualization tool that you can be able to plug in particular data sets, and then you can just see how the graph looks like. So an example that I can also share, I know John has already looked at this, but one that we also created when we did one of our investigations is this. So if you visualize the network, if you visualize a particular network, you can be able to see who are the accounts that actually posted most of the tweets, who are the accounts that actually interacted more within the network. So like here, you can see this account called Peter Kariuki had a number of retweets within the network. So that means the conversation there had a lot of impact within the network, yeah? So Rehema too here with green, the green indication shows that this person was very influential within that particular network. So once you visualize, you can be able to extract key accounts within that network, and then you do now further investigation into those particular accounts. Same for Flourish. Flourish also is a data visualization tool that you can be able to build. You can also build networks like Gephi. So, and this one, you don't actually need any coding skills. You can actually check out that tool set and then try and play around with it and see how best it can help you. Also, it also does other visualization, like you can create a pie chart, you can create a bar graph, you can create any type of chart that you are thinking of, and then that will also at the end of the day give you a number of indicators on where you should be focusing on. So lastly, let me just look at some of the website investigations techniques. So for a website investigation, the key thing that we normally use is the source code. So you might be asking yourself, where do I get this source code for a particular website? So I'll take an example of one of like, for example, this website. So for some of iLab work that you've done before, you can visit this website. So for you to see the source code for a particular website, you just right click on that website. And then you can see there, it says that view page source. So that is how you look at the source code. So once you click on that, it will open for you a new tab with the text behind that particular website. So this is a very rich and very informative part of the website. So here you can see all the text that is linked to it and also all the data sets and metadata behind it. So I know John has also covered some of the best indicators you can look at. So one thing that we normally look for is like any link or any mention to a name or an account within, if it's a blog, there will be also a mention of the user of that blog. If it's a website, you can also be able to like track the AdSense account or the AdSense code, and then now you use other tools to try and identify who is behind that particular web page. Yeah, and then so some of the shared resources that I would also advise is the InVid tool. So the InVid tool is basically a tool that you can use to do either photo or video analysis. So it's able to like do a forensic analysis of either a photo or a video and give you an indicator of whether it has been manipulated. You can also use it to do reverse Google search or image search so that you pinpoint whether that image has been shared before. This actually has been covered by Bellingcat presentation. If you're part of it, I know they expounded a little more about the InVid tool. So it's a very useful tool and we use it during our investigations. One thing also that we use a lot is the Wayback Machine. So this is just a website where archived versions of different websites are available. So you can be able to plug in a URL and you will actually see different versions of how a website looked like probably even 5 years ago, 7 years ago. And that is usually a very useful thing, because for a website, when someone wants to create a website, the start of a website, they usually plug in so much information. So if you plug in a URL, you'll be able to like pinpoint when that particular website was created, and then look at the first versions of that website, and that will actually give you some more information on who you should be looking at and who is behind that particular website. So also this tool can be used to archive. So if you are an investigator, one thing that you need to be keen about is having evidence, yeah? So evidence is really important, and if the website is available, it can be taken down anytime. So you just collect the URL of that website, come and plug it into Wayback Machine, and that you will be able to save the page so that you can be able to visit it later. Even if the page is taken down, you still have the evidence of how the page looked like, yeah? Yeah, so there are other tools that you can use also to save. There is another website called archive.today. That is also a useful tool that you can use to save evidence of that you find online. And you can even plug in even Twitter accounts or Twitter posts or Facebook posts or any post that you just see on the internet. You save it, and then you'll be able to use it in your report or in some of the investigations that you do. Yeah, so basically that is what I wanted to discuss this moment. But if you need further training on how to actually use these tool sets, you can reach out to us. We will be very happy to like schedule sessions to try and show you practically how to use these tool sets. So Chris, I don't know if there are any questions.
Oh, there are. So the first question is quite interesting because it indicates, I think, how new this discipline is. And it's a user who asks, what do you guys call yourselves? Like, what is your job description? Maybe Alan, you can go first.
Yes, so for me, I call myself a forensic researcher because basically you're doing a forensic analysis into particular information or an investigation that you're doing. So yeah, basically that is my title as it's written on the slide.
Fine, don't get nasty. And interesting enough, we're going through a big process now. I work in the same place as Alan, where we're trying to evolve a job description for more data researchers and trying to think of titles for them. It's quite interesting. It reminds me of the early days of the internet where we had to change the name journalist to content producer. And Jean, what is your title?
I think we tend to use the term open source investigator because the tools and the evidence that we rely on to make our findings is open source tools, and that kind of encompasses everything from geolocation to website investigations, social media investigations, social network analysis. All of that openly available information gets pooled in together. There's quite a lot of it that complies with the requirements of a forensic research, and that you're collecting evidence. What Alan mentioned about archiving your findings as you go along is very important. Even though, for example, the Tracy Zilla account deleted some of their tweets, I was still able to reference them in my research, because when I was looking at them, I archived them. And it's, I mean, it's quite important. There's nothing worse than having an excellent investigation, but then going back and finding that the account has now been deleted or the web page has gone down.
And another very interesting question from Yuzi Wang. Would you try to contact social media platforms for taking down these accounts, spreading this information? So I guess you guys should probably talk a bit about Alan, the PaceCheck relationship with Facebook, and Jean, the DFR Lab Atlantic Council relationship. Maybe Jean wants to go first, since he's on screen.
Yeah, happy to. I've got, I mean, we've got a relationship with Facebook, but it's actually kind of the other way around. We don't usually provide them with accounts to take down. There's very rare instances where that does happen. I think earlier this year in South Africa, we took down a company marketing face masks that was creating these COVID-19 awareness groups in order to harvest the people on there for marketing purposes. So we ended up getting that network shut down. But generally, it's the other way around. Facebook will approach us and say, here's a list of accounts that we're looking at. These are networks that we've identified. go and find what open source information you have that can corroborate those networks. And we're actually busy with, I think, 4 at the moment now, unfortunately not in Africa, but all of these are in Eurasian countries. But we're busy with those kind of takedowns at the moment. Alan?
Yeah, so yeah, same thing even on our end. So we have a relationship with Facebook. Anytime, so at Code for Africa, we also incubate PesaCheck, which is one of the largest fact-checking networks within the continent. So we basically have a relationship with Facebook where any disinformation or any misinformation that is shared across the platforms, we identify them and report it to Facebook for them to either flag it as misinformation. So those flags that you normally see on Facebook when you visit particular posts saying that this is false information, it has been fact-checked by some of our fact-checking network members. So yeah, basically we have a relationship with both Facebook and other social media platforms so that we can be able to report on all the observations that we see across social media, and then they are able to either take down some of the networks if they show any evidence of coordinated and inauthentic behavior.
Cool. I think we have about 1.5 minutes left. So one quick question. Is there a kind of an arms race between you guys and the misinformation peddlers? You know, how do they change what they do, and how do you keep up? And do the tools have to change as well? I don't know, Jean, if you want to answer that, or Alan.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely an arms race. The first time I got involved with open source investigation was in 2016, when South Africans were exposed to these Gupta bot accounts. And I mean, the techniques they were using back then was very crude. They were kind of coordinating using TweetDeck, which made them very clear and very easy to spot. They were using pictures of people that were easy to reverse image search. They were also using a lot of the techniques and things that made them quite easy to spot and identify as non-South African sock puppets. These days, they are getting a lot smarter. They are, there are websites you can go onto and get a very realistic AI-generated human face that you'll only pick up is not a real human face under close scrutiny. And these disinformation actors are getting more and more accomplished. They know the kind of techniques that we use to identify them. And as they develop, we on the other hand develop as well. So there is that kind of arms race that you get where I think both sides are running as fast as they can just to stay in the same place.
Yes, so maybe just on that. So one thing also we do is like we try and empower a number of people to also do the investigations themselves, because there's as much as you can do as an individual. So we work together with newsrooms across the continent to try and show them how to do these particular investigations, show them how to be on the lookout for disinformation, peddlers across the internet. So it's a very interesting sessions that we hold with them so that they can be able to also do the investigation by themselves. So what if we have a huge number of people actually doing this particular research? At the end of the day, we get to unearth so many scrupulous individuals.
And then just to end, people have been asking, can you share the links or your presentations? Can I invite them to contact both of you on Twitter if they have any particular questions?
They're welcome to. I think the AIJC will be sharing a document with all of the links and to the tools and the things that we used. I'm not sure, it might be up on the website, or I know we did submit these little fact sheets with all of the tools that we used, but you're welcome to get in touch with me. My Twitter handle is @Jean_Leroux, or you can contact us at @DFR Lab as well.
Yes, so you can feel also comfortable to contact me. My Twitter handle is @Alan_Cheboy. So, and also you can just reach out to us, or you can find our contacts and our other information on investigate.africa.
Guys, thanks so much for that. It was super interesting, and also really, really useful and utility-based, which is fantastic. And I see that's being echoed in the comments on the chat as well. So thank you very much. And thank you for the people who've attended, and we hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.